Now, for more on relations between China and Germany, we're joined by Maximilian Rech. He's Program Director and Assistant Professor in International Affairs at ESSCA School of Management. Now, what would you say are the highlights and the major outcomes of Premier Li's visit to Germany?
Good morning, good afternoon to the United States. Now, of course, it is very important that Premier Li Keqiang and Angela Merkel will be working together in the foreseeable future. As we have seen, there's breaking news this morning, Shanghai time, that President Trump of the US administration does no longer want to support the Paris Accord and has actually decided to pull the United States out of this important environmental treaty, which was signed last year, 2 years ago in Paris, by 195 states. I think it is important that both Premier Li Keqiang as well as Angela Merkel stand up for the important issue of protecting our planet from further experiencing climate change and more extreme weather phenomena. And so if both of those important leaders stand up and continue work on protecting the environment, that would be an important outcome of the summit. Now, apart from that, obviously, we have had a lot of economic cooperation taking place, which means that the relations between China and Germany have continued to go from strength to strength. And as a matter of fact, many companies have been accompanying the Premier on his visit for Germany. And of course, contracts have been signed that further underline the cooperation between those two important economic partners.
Now, Maximilian, you mentioned a couple of areas of cooperation that we saw there. What about in terms of the Belt and Road Initiative?
The Belt and Road Initiative is, of course, a very important initiative that was initiated by President Xi Jinping in 2013. And I think what it emphasizes is that there is the possibility for cooperation on the Eurasian landmass, with Europe on the far end of the Eurasian landmass and China on the other far end of the Eurasian landmass. I do think that the Belt and Road Initiative is a huge infrastructure project where Europe and China could work together on actually connecting those two far ends of the Eurasian landmass. As you know, today there will also be the summit between China and the European Union, and connectivity will be one of the major points on the agenda. The Belt and Road Initiative will have to invest a lot, but if you compare it to the Marshall Plan, then you do see that the investment that is foreseen will have potentially very positive effects on both Europe and China, but also on the countries on both the economic belt as well as the maritime Silk Road.
Now, that covers obviously land and sea, but let's also talk about air. We know that Li called on Germany to help the China-developed large passenger plane, the C919, get an airworthiness certificate from the European Union. What's the significance if the aircraft can get this certificate?
Yes, indeed. In Europe, we have EASA as well as the national member states agencies that do provide airworthiness for a newly constructed and newly designed airplane. It would be, of course, good if the C919 would get this airworthiness disclaimer in the very soon future. What would be the repercussions of that? I do think that the C919 is in competition with, for example, the Airbus A320. In that sense, it is a passenger plane for approximately 4,000 kilometers range. That means that there will not be a lot of intercontinental flights, and I think the primary objective of this airplane is to connect the consumers in between two cities for a shorter range. So I think primarily it is developed for the Chinese market, right. And potentially it could also enter the European market. And we will have to see what the agencies say, such as EASA, before we can see whether or not airworthiness is actually obtained.
Now, also very important, Chancellor Merkel said the EU will fulfill its obligations under Article 15 of the WTO Protocol on China's accession. What will this mean in terms of easing trade frictions and really helping bilateral ties between China and Germany and the EU?
Yes, indeed. I think that obtaining market economy status is an important element for the People's Republic of China. The European Union is currently looking into that, and we're still trying to figure out how exactly this procedure could work in the future. We know that the WTO accession agreement of the People's Republic of China is by now obsolete. However, the exact procedure of specifying whether or not China will be a market economy status is still under negotiation. Nevertheless, I do think that Angela Merkel is very much aware of the importance of the Chinese-German trade relationship. And in that sense, I do think that, again, the relationship can only go from strength to strength. If we look at investment ties between the two countries, they have been going up and up. As a matter of fact, right now, Germany is investing about 2.3 billion euros in China, and vice versa. China is now investing about 13 billion in Germany. That is the numbers from 2016, which means that investment is very important for both partners, and the companies are actually working together. We have heard of deals such as the Midea merger and acquisition takeover of KUKA. I do think if you look at these examples of a Chinese white goods producer trying to cooperate with German companies such as KUKA, who are in automation and robotics, then we see that to a certain extent, those two markets can be very complementary. And being complementary is an important element of economic cooperation that can then foster trade and also investment in the future.
Certainly a lot of positive momentum. Thank you so much, Maximilian Rech.